Hey everyone, this is Zach with 8020 Media, here today with a video on the best 5.7 Hemi engine upgrades. The 5.7 Hemi is a little underpowered from the factory, especially by modern standards considering its large 5.7 liter displacement, which produces anywhere from 340 up to 420 horsepower and 370 to 410 foot-pounds of torque. Now, the higher power and torque numbers are mostly for the 2009 Plus, when Chrysler had switched to the 5.7 Eagle and made a number of great updates to make the 5.7 Hemi engine a little bit more modern. But with that said, the 5.7 Hemi is very receptive to engine upgrades, and it really does leave a lot of power on the table from the factory. A few simple bolt-ons can really wake up the 5.7 liter V8 and really take this Hemi to the next level. With that being said, it is relatively easy to take this engine into the roughly 400 to 425 wheel horsepower ballpark with a few of these simple bolt-on mods that I discussed throughout the rest of the video. Let's go ahead and jump in and discuss the best modifications for the 5.7 Hemi. Number one on the list, we have tuning. Now, compared to some other bolt-on mods while keeping the 5.7 Hemi naturally aspirated, a tune doesn't offer the biggest or best power gains. However, it does still offer gains of roughly 5 to 15 wheel horsepower just with a basic off-the-shelf tune. But more importantly, tuning is the foundation to building a more powerful 5.7 liter Hemi engine, and it really helps maximize the power and performance gains from additional modifications. And a tune is also required for a number of mods like camshafts, potentially some headers, etc. Tying into tuning, fueling is another important topic to discuss when talking about tuning. The biggest power gains are going to be seen on higher quality fuels like 91 or 93 octane, and so that is an important consideration if you are looking to tune your 5.7 Hemi. We would highly recommend opting for a 91 or 93 octane tune depending on what you have available in your area. You can even take things further if you have easy access to higher octane fuels or things like E85 ethanol fueling. However, ethanol does require some fuel system upgrades. Just again, fueling is something important to keep in mind alongside tuning. The better fuel you have access to run, the bigger the power gains you're going to see from the 5.7 Hemi with tuning, as well as with the addition of some of the rest of the bolt-ons that we discussed throughout this video. Moving on to the second best upgrade, we have a cold air intake. There isn't really too much to say here. It's cheap, it's simple, and at the end of the day, it's an effective modification to add power to the 5.7 liter V8. Looking at exact power gains, it's not going to be the most impressive modification. On a stock 5.7 Hemi or a tune-only 5.7 Hemi, you might only see power gains of roughly 3 to 5 wheel horsepower and about the same wheel torque. One thing important to point out is that those are the peak gains that you're going to see. However, an intake can actually deliver bigger gains overall, especially looking at the top end of the RPM band, where a cold air intake can just help the engine breathe that much easier, and so up top you might see slightly better power and performance gains. Otherwise, as you start adding more and more modifications, the addition of a cold air intake is only going to help those mods further, because the more power you throw at the engine, the more important it is to help keep it breathing well and supplying fresh, cool air to the engine. If you're just getting into modding your 5.7 Hemi, a great starting point is a tune as well as a cold air intake. Moving on to upgrade number 3, we have headers. There are a couple important things to point out with headers. There are a lot of different routes you can go when upgrading the headers on the 5.7 Hemi. There are shorty headers, long tube, as well as catless and high flow catted headers. So which combination you choose can have an impact on the performance and power. Generally, catless long tube headers are going to be the best bet for performance. Following that would be high flow catted long tube headers, and then after that, the shorty headers will still offer respectable power and performance gains. Regardless of which route you choose, this is still one of the single best bolt-on modifications on a naturally aspirated 345 Hemi engine. So you can expect to see gains in the ballpark of about 10 to 25 wheel horsepower and also about 5 to 15 wheel torque. And on top of that, headers, especially long tube headers, are going to add much deeper, much more aggressive exhaust notes. So an added benefit on top of the power and torque gains that headers are able to add. Modification and upgrade number 4 is camshaft upgrades. When looking at cam upgrades for the 5.7 Hemi, it can be a little complex. Not every cam is going to be the right pick for your build. Cams can really change the performance and overall power and torque bands of the 5.7 Hemi. So generally, when you look at really aggressive camshafts, they can offer peak power gains of an incredible 40, 50, even up to about 60 wheel horsepower. However, when you opt for a camshaft that's that aggressive and really provides that big of a top-end power gain, oftentimes those will perform a little bit worse in the lower end and start of the mid-range for torque. Now, with that being said, the one good thing about the 5.7 Hemi engines is even from the factory, they provide very good and respectable torque in the low end and mid-range. And so oftentimes sacrificing a little bit of that on the low end isn't a huge deal, especially if you're looking for a high power build and something that you can really rev out and hold that peak power all the way up top. There are all sorts of other cam upgrades in between, from stock to mild, moderate, and all the way up to aggressive cams. So again, depending on what you're looking for in your build, there are different camshafts that can really help you achieve the proper power and torque band that you're looking for. So ultimately, when it comes to camshafts, this is absolutely, in my opinion, the single best upgrade for a naturally aspirated 5.7 Hemi. However, the reason I saved it to discuss last on the list is because, again, the right profile and the right camshaft for your car depends on your build and what you're looking to do with it. And so you don't want to jump into a camshaft upgrade too early and pick a cam that might end up not being a good fit for a future build. So generally, I would recommend waiting and holding off on cams until you get to a place where you're happy with the 345 Hemi and you really just want to extract every little bit of performance you can. A good quality camshaft kit for the 5.7 Hemi generally runs anywhere from about $800 to $1,500, maybe even a little bit more expensive. And if you're not DIYing that, labor can add in another roughly $1,000 or even a little bit more than that. Now, that wraps up the 4 best modifications for the 5.7 Hemi engine. However, I did have a couple other popular bolt-ons that are also great upgrades for the 345 Hemi engine, just things that we would probably put off until after the first 4 if you're in the position of really just looking to maximize that naturally aspirated performance. And a few of those mods include a catback exhaust. A catback exhaust can offer gains of about 3 to 7 wheel horsepower. One thing to keep in mind though is if you pair that with headers, things can get excessively loud very quickly. So if you don't want your car to be too loud and are after performance, headers are really the best bet. And then at that point, it's probably best to hold off on the catback exhaust. Another great upgrade is the throttle body. However, the factory throttle body is 80 millimeters, which is actually the same size as the throttle body in the larger 6.4 Hemi that makes 450 plus horsepower from the factory. So ultimately, that 80 millimeter throttle body is more than enough to support 450 plus horsepower. And I really wouldn't recommend doing that until you really are maximizing performance, going forced induction, or really going for an all-out max performance, naturally aspirated build. Third on the list of additional upgrades, we have an intake manifold. Now, a couple options here. You can port the manifold, opt for a 6.1 or 6.4 Hemi manifold. Both great options for upgrading the intake manifold. And again, another great modification if you're looking to maximize naturally aspirated performance. It really doesn't offer huge top-end power gains. However, it can really help improve the low-end and mid-range performance. And then last but not least on the list, we have forced induction. I'll be super quick here. Forced induction is obviously a whole different ballpark. Extremely expensive if you're looking to go for a supercharger or turbocharger kit. Often you'll end up spending $5,000 to $10,000 for this, especially once you start factoring in supporting modifications like fueling upgrades and anything else necessary to support a forced induction setup. But ultimately, if you are looking to build a 500, 700 plus wheel horsepower 5.7 Hemi, then forced induction is going to be the best bet, and really the only route you can go if you are looking to push much past that 450 or 500 wheel horsepower ballpark. Anyway, that wraps up this video for today, guys. If you appreciated the content, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for more. Thanks, everyone.